listening to Coffee and Conversation with Recovery Advocate Network, the nonprofit organization that strives to address the staggering disparity in resource availability for individuals suffering from mental health disorders, processing disorders, addictions, trauma healing, and sexual identity challenges. Together, we strive to end the stigma associated with these challenges so that true healing can begin. Welcome back to Coffee and Conversation. I am your host, and I welcome you to listen to today's guest, who is Nellie Hardin, a wife, mother to 4 teenage daughters, and an author and speaker in family life and leadership. Nellie started the 6570 Family Project because she firmly believes in the immense potential of the second half of childhood. This is the training ground for their adulthood and is not something to be left to chance and hope or given up on, but something you can forge relationships, guidance, trust, and connection through, and doing it together. Nellie has authored 2 insightful books, 40 Scriptures and Conversations to Have When Raising Daughters, and No Problem Parenting book to help parents navigate challenges and offering conversation platforms for parents and daughters. With her knowledge and expertise, she can help parents set their kids up with a rock-solid foundation where they can launch their lives before they leave home. Through her process, she has developed the formula that will help you lead your kids toward true self-worth, genuine self-esteem, and genuine, unwavering confidence. So, I love this conversation. I've talked a lot about my own childhood and struggles that I had and my path towards being the best human I can be today. So I hope you love this conversation. Okay, so now let's steam forward with it. But first, our 3 C's. And what are they? Well, 1, it is commit. Commit to staying for the full episode. At the end, she gives the key that you want to remember and take away, as well as her favorite motivational quotes. And what is our 2nd C? Okay, this one is going to be click. I think I changed the order on these. Okay, I love it. The 2nd C is click. Click that love, like, subscribe, follow, and please click the donate button. Everyone with Recovery Advocate Network and Coffee and Conversation, we're all volunteers. And the whole point is to reduce the stigma, is to provide this education as a resource, but it is also to provide financial grants to individuals who need treatment. So please click that donate button and provide a donation today. And that final C, well, of course, it is your coffee. So fill up your coffee, sit back, and let's get started. What Recovery Advocate Network, though, is it's not just addiction. And
yes, I'm
glad
sorry
you said that because it is also don't know, because so many people think that still have this idea, and I'm sure actually, with my research into what you do, also have this false idea that mental wellness or mental health or whatnot just covers this one area. And so much of what I've really tried to push with this podcast is, like, several of the guests I've talked to have talked on leader. I mean, I actually plan on re-interviewing some of them, or I may even just republish some of them on my other podcast. We've talked about boundaries, leadership. I just interviewed, the episode I just released earlier this week was the vice president of student engagement and well-being at Georgia Tech. So we talked about, the college setting. I've interviewed a lot of book authors talking about a variety of topics. And so the founding of it of Recovery Advocate Network really was several of us who were at a treatment center, but actually, I believe only one of the founders was actually there for addiction. I was there because I was the victim of a kidnapping. So I was there for PTSD. And one of the other members was there for grief. His daughter was 3 and she suddenly passed away. Another was a former police officer. She was also for PTSD. And so we really identified some of the struggles for the financial burdens of treatment. And then also this reality of the need to educate society, the need for people to talk about it, and really have this culture change about being able to encourage people to live their best lives. So really someone such as yourself, and in researching what you're doing, and I was telling one of my team members today, I was like, I'm interviewing this lady tonight, and I sent the link, and it's so on top of it because I have, you know, how as we start to age, and my daughter's 22, she's out of the house, but I have several team members who have, guess what, teenage daughters, and they were just in Slack. And actually I had dinner last night with another previous colleague who has some teenage daughters. And just a couple of weeks ago, they were in Slack and they were like, okay, who's going to give me advice about how to raise these teenage girls in the world we have today? Yeah. And then I pulled up your thing. And so now, you know what we're going to do, Nellie? We're just going to dig in. Okay, listeners, I don't know how much of this intro, I'm glad I already pressed record is all I'm going to say. I don't know how much of what we have already said I'm going to include in this intro, but listeners, welcome to this episode. I am really stoked to have Nellie with me. And Nellie, what I love to do is listeners hear me talk all the time. So what we're going to do is we're going to say, Ange, just shut up and stop talking. And now, Nellie, will you please introduce yourself and tell us why you're here today?
All right. Well, hello, everyone. My name is Nellie Hardin. Thank you so much, Ange, for having me on the show. And so why am I here today? It really comes from, all the way back in my own upbringing, becoming a woman in this world, and then all the way folded over to the fact that I'm raising 4 teenage daughters right now and everything in between. So my entire background is in biology and psychology. But when I left home at the age of 17 to go off to college, 7 hours away from home, I had no idea back then. I did not have the vocabulary, the know-how, what have you, to understand. I really did not have a foundation of worth, esteem, and confidence within myself. And without that, you have no hope of a self-disciplined leadership within yourself, right? But without that, and what I see still so much happening today is when you release a young woman out into the world without that, then she ends up chasing her worth anywhere and everywhere that she can find it. And that was certainly what I did. And within 8 weeks of being dropped off at college, I went down some terrible corridors that was just, oh, come over here and you'll be worthy. Come over here and you'll be worthy. Come over here and you'll be worthy. And it really set me up for despair and heartache and unworthiness that then I've taken decades to try and heal from, even in just those first 8 weeks. And so in the midst of, my healing, in the midst of all of my career and everything, I'm trying to do all of this. And then I am given 4 precious daughters within 4 years to, I know, right? To raise. And so here I am, still very much living an unworthy life, meaning I did not see my own worth, not to mean that my life was unworthy, but I did not see that. And so I had no value and appreciation and belief in self. And then I'm given these 4 young women, and we went through a period where my husband almost passed. So my dad passed when I was super young. I was just 1. And then my husband almost passed at about the same time. I had a 4-year-old, 2 2-year-olds, and a newborn, and we're in ICU. And it was just, to say it was altering in so many ways. And we've been through, one swing of the pendulum to the other. And he's still here today. Let me preface this with that. But it was a very eye-opening moment to say, okay, if I have to do this on my own, and even if I don't, I have a certain amount of time to get these young women to a point that they can be self-disciplined leaders before they leave the house, equipped with their worth, esteem, and confidence, so they can go out there and be successful wherever and however they are called to in this world. And I've been really living that ever since. And for my own family. And then in 2012, I was really called to put it out there. My first part of my career was actually all in the animal realm. I worked with humpbacks and belugas and, all sorts of things. And then I took a break during that, which happened to be when my husband was sick. And then I was called into the much more messy and complicated human realm around 12, 13 years ago now. So, that is a real big 35,000 foot view of how I got to where I am today in helping people that are raising the next generation of women, and also just women today that didn't have this foundation built, or did and had it swiped away by trauma, how to rebuild it in their lives. So
I love this so much. And I believe I am a use case scenario of how you can rebuild this. And I will say this, and for anyone who has been saying in their head, oh, I'm going to one day tear down Angela because I know all of her skeletons. I'm just going to go ahead and throw my skeletons out in the closet. I'm going to throw them out right now. They're going to be released. And so you hold no power over me. But I was born into an incredibly abusive family of all sorts. Very, very, very abusive. I've talked about it a lot on the podcast. And so I grew up very promiscuous. I looked for affection, love, and trying to feel worthy in a lot of different ways. And it's interesting that myself, now I turn 49 next week. So it's interesting when I look back and I think, wow, I was so intelligent. I was very bright. I graduated number 5 in my class only because in the 9th grade, one weekend, I did not do 2 homework assignments. I got zeros in them. And that's why I did not graduate top of my class. Always do your homework, kiddos. Anyways, but I knew I was smart and I had this idea I was worthy, but I couldn't get any words of affirmation from anyone. I couldn't get any affection. So I constantly looked, and I really spent probably the first 30 something years of my life looking for that. And maybe even more than that. I really should figure out when that transition happened in my life. And it's interesting because people now, when they look at me and my accomplishments, and when I speak and I try and encourage other people, and I have the hashtag that I'm working to trademark Be Brave, Be Badass. And then people see that. And it is part of that. I think every individual has their own personal badass, which is their own personal best human being self. And I think a lot of people just haven't figured out how to be brave enough to be that, right? And I finally figured out, and when I had the freedom and figured out how to feel empowered, how to find that within myself, it was so amazing. And so when I say to people, protect your children, protect the children around us, and give them these skills and these gifts, oh my gosh, how much more I could have accomplished over all of those years if I had had someone in my life, such as you, Nellie, or if I'd had parents or individuals in my life in those early days, really harnessing this energy and feeding this into me. So I was so excited. I was also kind of laughing at some of the questions at the front of your website. Like I will say one of them that kind of cracked me up, because I thought this is actually for everyone in life. Like, how can I let's see. Yeah. How can I speak in a way that she doesn't take everything as an invitation for an argument? Nellie, I thought about that. I was like, okay, that applies to my boyfriend. That might apply for my boss. That some of my team members might hear it. Anyway, okay, it's time for me to stop talking. But I loved that because I was thinking of myself, and I'm very happy and love who I am today and what I've been able to accomplish. So I can say that the journey to this is so worth it, and it can happen, but it needs to be disciplined, and it needs to be very purposeful, and it takes a lot of work. So why don't we dig in a little bit into, hey, let's talk about what was a transition point that made you realize, Nellie, that you really wanted to focus on this line of work? Because looking at the work you're doing, you've put your heart and soul and a lot of work into actually building a program, a process, and something into this. So what was kind of that turning moment that you stepped back and said, wait, people haven't really helped teach people how to do this.
Absolutely. So there was certainly that point that the light bulb went off when I was in the hospital and my husband was sick and everything. But then I started getting into because as you can imagine, during the 2.5 years that he was in and out of the hospital and going through all of this, we had to make some major changes within our family. And, we had 4 kids, 4 and under, and a husband that couldn't get off the couch because he would, fall asleep reading Goodnight Moon, and because his heart wasn't working. And so there had to be a lot of changes that were going, and we did not have outside family around us to help either. My husband and I had to dig in and figure out how we're going to do this. And so there was this, I have power within myself to get through this and do hard things, right? I can do hard things. So that was part of it. But when I started working in wellness, positive disciplines with families, I was working with a company, and just the 6 of us, we would always all go to conferences, and it was, my work, but we would always all go, and my kids would be sitting in on these conferences. In the back, they were, anywhere from, I think the youngest one was 4 maybe, and going on up. And we would have some of the most rich conversations after these speakers would get up. And it really just dawned on me, when do people actually start to get leadership training, if at all, right? It is in their 20s, maybe 30s, 40s, 50s, 60s even. But hold on a second, that is way after the prefrontal cortex is already fully formed, right? The brain is not nearly as malleable and formidable at that age. So why don't we take these grand lessons of how to be, like you're saying, the best version of ourselves, the bravest version of ourselves, and put it in childhood when the brain is forming, to make those connections so they can become that person, right? Instead of, like myself and like you, being an adult and having to take a jackhammer to all of the foundation, the faulty foundation that we had, or that was ripped away, or what have you, depending on your life experience. And so if we can build that sound foundation in childhood, and it's not just about building it for them, it starts by building it for them, but then you build it with them. And so they learn how to build the house on top of that foundation afterwards, right? And it's this gradual handing over of the baton of their life. I call parents architects because we're planning, designing, and building the beginning of someone else's life. And that is a huge responsibility. And we need to take it as such and not just be in survival mode the whole time. There are seasons for that. Trust me, I know. But we have 6,570 days, give or take, in order to go through this experience of childhood, parenthood, and relationship with your kid during this literally once in a lifetime malleable state. So let's take advantage of it and build in them their personal foundation to make them who they can be. So all that to say, it was a gradual point, a gradual transition, and the light bulb getting brighter of saying, hold on a second, we need to start putting this into our children, not trying to drill this into.
No, I love this. I don't know why this happened, but when you were talking about this architect, and then I was also thinking about the kids learning to do it. I had this vision of Bob the Builder. Oh my gosh, now I'm totally showing my age of that cartoon. My daughter used to build it, but I used to watch it. But it made me think of, okay, we can also make these types of things fun and collaborative things we do together. Okay. This should be a part of the journey of life that we're living together. And I love how you count down those number of days, because one of the things that I talk of as being a COO of companies, I talk with my team members about, and I'm like, oh my goodness, do not miss the birthday party, the dance recital, the whatever. Our company, guess what, is going to continue to go on. Okay. And so I say that to say, hey, don't miss those critical points in those days that you're mentioning. And the way that you don't miss them is to be very purposeful about setting those milestones out that are age appropriate milestones for those leadership moments. I interviewed the author Sandra Rostarola on her book, Making Friends with Monsters, which, Nellie, have you heard of this book?
I have heard of this book.
No,
yes.
You haven't. Oh, yes. Oh my gosh. I love this book. I love this book. I actually think that all schools at certain age appropriate ages should read the book. I think that parents, I think it's a great book for parents to read with their children in age appropriate ages to talk about
Mm.
emotions and how children should learn emotions. It's another thing of helping our children become healthy adults, because then they will then be able to pass
Yes.
this on to their children. And I think it's great. And much to what you said, instead of having to take a big jackhammer and, destroy all of the damage that was done in order to find those gems underneath. Hey, why don't we take those gems and grow them into something beautiful? And so you saw this as a moment. And I'm also picturing, the kids in the back, probably like
Yeah,
drawing pictures
completely.
and asking. I bet they asked some pretty yeah, I bet they ask some pretty unique
Oh, yeah.
questions too, because they come up with the things that you're like, wow, I actually never thought about that, which was probably, if you at some point think of some unique question they ask, I have to hear it. But okay, so you thought about this and you said, yeah, this is pretty brilliant. But there's a big leap between that and now you literally are dedicating your life to this mission. Now, how old are your kids now? How old are the
19,
girls?
16, 16, and 14.
Oh my
yeah,
goodness.
so we are in the thick of it. So we are in the launching phase, all the things, like doing it all right now. And so yeah, all high school, and so I have one in high school, two of them dually enrolled in high school, college, and one fully.
Wow. Okay. So, and is this your full-time mission right
100%.
now? And if that's what I thought. Okay. So here, I mean, let's fast forward, right? You're sitting there and you're seeing the challenges with your husband, and that is so hard, right? I mean, it is a life-changing event, and you have these 4 precious souls that you've been gifted, and you have the gift as well to realize you have an opportunity to make a huge impact on future leaders in our world, maybe future mothers, or whatever they choose to do in their future, right? And then you have this eye moving moment. I can't think of the word I was looking for, but you have this moment where it opens your eyes and you're like, okay, I can be the person because I have grit and I have passion and I'm going to do this. Okay. And you start creating. So how did you come up with the structure that you now walk families through? Walk me through a little bit about that and how, individuals begin partnering with you. Like, is it that you partner with the families, or tell me a little bit about that journey?
Okay. So I'll try to answer all of them in order. So,
don't worry about it.
Re-ask me something if I don't answer it. So
I will. No worries.
So yeah, so I just like literally everything I've done in my life, it was something I did or something that I had to come up with for my own family, and then I was called to share it with others after we had, gone through it or were going through it. And so we were going through it. I decided to homeschool for 7 years. So I did that with my 4 kids, which I am, people always say, oh, you must be so I am not patient. I am not patient. And that was a learning curve for mama here to learn that. But it was great to go through that learning experience side by side with my kids and know I am not patient. Let's not test, this boundary right now. And so let's focus on this. But over those 7 years, I transformed into a much better version of myself through the hard and pointy parts of homeschooling, plus just learning side by side with them. So that was an experience. And all this time, I'm gaining a little bit more momentum. I'm being asked to speak a little bit more at just, little places here and there about what we're doing. And then, like so many, literally billions of stories, the COVID pivot. Okay, so the COVID pivot happened, and we had already, we homeschooled before it was cool, COVID cool. So I started getting all of these messages like, oh my goodness, I have to homeschool now and I have no idea what to do. How do you do this? Right. And so I started helping several people as I was getting these messages flooding into my system. And I had been working in positive family disciplines from wellness, mental wellness, physical wellness, spiritual wellness for a while, but then this was happening. And, I could care less what curriculum you were using with your kids. That is fully up to you. But what the real issue that was happening was these parents that were saying, I do not know how to relate and be an authority in this field to my child and put up with each other and have that patience with one another, right? And respect and honoring. And so I really started working with all of these families, and many of them were young women, because the young men, they were being a little bit more distant, a little bit more chill, and the young women were being a lot more vocal about what was happening in the homes. And I just happened to be a woman and be raising 4 women. And so I just naturally, melted into the space that I am now. And I realized, I was like, well, hold on, like, what did I do personally in order to regain my life through my healing after I, over the last 20, 25 years that I've been on that journey? How have I done that with my kids? And I started reading and researching and reading and researching. I mean, this summer alone, I've probably read almost 4,000 pages on different things, just to make sure everything is in line with where I, my framework is. I'm like, yep.
Love that. I love being a constant learner.
Yeah.
Like, I just love.
Absolutely. And so I really looked at what I needed to do. And like I said, my background's in biology and psychology. And I really love the marriage of what is happening biologically and how that transpires physiologically, of course, but psychologically, and how that all interplays with one another. And understanding, and I just had an innate understanding because of my background, but so many parents do not understand biologically what's going on in the brain. And when you do, it opens your parenting up to so much more grace and understanding. And because it's really easy to look at your 11 and especially 15, 16-year-old daughter or son and say, they're just a younger adult. They're just a shorter version of an adult, but their brain tells a very, very different story. And if we can understand brain chemistry and brain anatomy and what is happening and being formed and broken, etc., then us as parents can have a lot more understanding and guidance during the hard and sticky parts of adolescence. And so that comes into play. And then the psychology piece. I have 4 daughters that are 4 incredibly different young women, which means I need to parent each one of them differently. I cannot have this overarching, parenting technique for all of my daughters. It won't work. Some would be forged ahead and some would be left behind, and vice versa, depending on what aspect I was talking about or acting out. So really understanding, okay, the psychology of one of my daughters is very different than the other. So I need to parent them and guide them and train them differently in order to become their best self in this world. And it really just got me thinking and understanding about these individuated, there we go, foundations for each of our young women. And you always hear there's no book on how to raise kids. And that's not really true. There's literally thousands of books on how to raise kids, but there's not the book on how to raise your kid. And child. That's where the blueprint comes in. I just want to hand people the blueprint so that you can figure out how to specifically build the house or the foundation for that child. And so it's just layered and layered over time, and then coming up with and understanding, oh wait, worth, what is worth made out of? Okay, worth has to come before value and appreciation of self. And that is your value, worth or esteem. So esteem is value and appreciation of self. You can't have that. It's non-existent without your worth. And then you absolutely cannot believe in yourself if you don't have the worth and if you don't value and appreciate yourself. So it naturally falls into this pyramid and a foundation that we need to build for our kids. And at the very tippy top, at the summit of that foundation, which is where they start to build their life on an individual basis, is self-discipline leadership.
Okay, so would you define then based off of that? How would you define worth?
So worth is understanding and knowing that you are worthy. And it truly is an inside out process. The world is going to tell you over and over again that it's an outside in process. And that's where I fell into the traps. It might have been where you fell into the traps too, right? And so we really need to teach them to look for their worth. And there's 5 pillars right there. It is, I am seen, I am heard, I am loved, I actually belong, right? I truly belong, and I have a purpose. Because if you take the opposite of any of those, you are going to find the root cause of, I'm going to be bold and say every, and I only say that because I haven't seen any exception yet. Feel free to let me know of one. But every issue that is facing our adolescents and frankly, our adults today comes from the opposite of one or more of those, right? I don't belong anywhere. There's no purpose for me being here. I'm not valued. No one hears what I have to say. My words are of no value, right? No one actually sees me. I feel invisible walking around. No one loves me, right? That is what we're doing. So we need to teach them how to intrinsically know these things so that they can extrinsically see them in the world that is there. Because if you go out in the world looking for negative, you absolutely will find negative 100%. But if you know it on the inside, you know it for yourself, you know it from a spirit level out, then you can see it on the outside world too, even if someone is in your.
So I can see that as a parent, creating a culture, because what you're doing is you're creating a culture. You're basically creating a small company. You're creating a culture, and you're like, hey, we're going to listen. You're going to be heard. You're going to be seen. You're going to do these things, right? Okay. So, but imagine, so we can imagine the child who's in a home where they are not seen, they are not heard,
right?
All of these negatives, right? Then you can see how does that child then find their worth?
Unfortunately, that is the world that we live in today. And I work out in the community with several of these young women that do live in homes like that. And I just really pray that they find someone. And for some of them, that is me. For some of them, that is another person. But seek out someone that can help you find the worth in yourself. And it might not even be, you might not feel worthy of being, having worth at that point. But I promise you, and if anyone is listening to this, adult or child, I promise you, you are, but you need to seek out some accountability in building that worth within yourself. And so for me, my husband and I are both youth leaders, and I, run groups here, not outside of youth too. I run groups in my community. I run groups around the world, and we help these young women see and build their worth. And then at the end, they're like, oh, I see it, right? I see it for very, very many times, the very first time in their life. And it's such a beautiful awakening to witness and be a part of. And, even to be a footnote in that story, to be able to see what it's like for a young woman to wake up to her worth. And then we can start building the trust, because the esteem, the value and appreciation of self, that is stemmed from trust of self. And what I do is I take the natural processes that are already happening in our brain, make these young women aware of them, first of all, right? And then make them work in their favor, because the world and everyone tells you, oh, you need to go find yourself. You need to go, find who you are, or what have you. And it's made it sound like, you go out into this field of daisies and you're like, which one am I? Right? Oh, I think I'm that one.
I still kind of want to go out in the field of daisies.
I'll go out in a field of daisies all day, but not to find which one I am. Absolutely. But then what's wrong with that? It is the next day you're like, I don't want to be that one anymore. I think I want to be this one, right? And there's no consistency and there's no building. I mean, you think about just an actual builder building a foundation to a home. We live in a neighborhood that has homes going up in it all over the place on the East Coast of the United States. And if I saw a different person, going over there every day, or the same person and being like, nope, scrap it, we're going to do this. Nope, scrap it, we're going to do this. Nothing gets built, right? And there's always that 6,570 days. That is always a ticking clock that is going, no matter what. So if this builder only has, 3 months, say, to get a foundation built, and they keep scrapping it every day, by the end of that 3 months, there's going to be a house put on there, and that house is going to crumble because it has no proper foundation under it. So that really is our job as the architect.
Well, and I believe that it's like this. Every company has a culture. You just decide whether or not you're going to be purposely building it, right? And this is what we need to do. And I think of the reality is every individual, we all have our personal brand. It's just, are you really sticking to being consistent to having one that is dependable and the brand you really want to have as a human being? When people think of you, what are they going to think about long term as who you are as a human being? And when you're able to have that grit and be able to really thrive in some of those things, that is what brings value. And I was thinking about also when you were talking about if you're listening to this podcast and you're in an environment, you're in a home or a situation where you are not feeling that value of worth. And I really want to say this specifically thinking about if you're working a job and you don't feel like you're heard, you're valued, these things, then guess what? There are other jobs out there. Update your resume and go and find another job. Do not go home and complain to all of your friends and whatnot about seriously, I've had people that I've mentored and they would come to me constantly complaining. And I'm finally like, okay, I'm done listening. Like, where's your resume? What did you interview for today? Because at a certain point, you just have to figure out how to, and you know what? It's not easy. So let's get into this because it's not easy to figure out how to step out of your comfort zone and learn. Because like you said at the very beginning of this podcast is that a lot of people are never taught how to be leaders. They're not taught how to do these things. And that's what occurred to you. So how do you go about the beginning processes of working with a family or working with parents to be able to learn these skills? Because I do believe so many of them, especially the way our families have grown up through generations, I don't believe that this has just been a natural progression of things to get here. I think it's something that we really need to learn. So how do you go about that?
Honestly, it starts with the tools. So with any project and that, you ever do, you need tools. And there's 4 distinct tools that you will need to build this foundation. And I say that you need these tools as a parent. You don't have to have them fully intact before you can start using them. You can build them side by side, your parenthood, childhood journey as well. And I say that because I did, and I know it's possible. But the first one has to be vision. And so we start really talking to the families about your vision. And vision, there's 2 parts to this. Number 1, you need to take an inventory of everything that you have. And this could be a simple exercise as brain dumping, right? So you take out a piece of paper, you just brain dump. No one ever needs to see this, so have no fear about what you're writing down, but you need to get everything out of the closet, scatter it around, and figure out what are your not your boundaries, but what are your walls keeping you from freedom, right? And you're going to discover in there when you do this, vision inventory of yourself as the leader of your home and one of the architects of your home, that there are some things that you want to bring into your parenting journey. And there is some things that you are not going to want to bring in. And you need to actually face those and start deconstructing them and moving them out of the way. They are never going to disappear fully. The scars of my childhood and the scars of my adolescence will always be with me. And that is okay. They've made me stronger now. When I was going through it, no. But through the healing process, they've made me stronger now. So you need to start moving toward that, whatever you need to do for that. Maybe it is as simple as really diving in, doing a lot of self-reflection and journaling and things. And maybe it is therapy or, whatever that is for you. But at least you will know this is the thing that is holding me back. And this is the thing I want to carry with me forward. So that's the first part of the vision piece. And the second part is, as your family, you really want to take an inventory and a vision of where are we right now, right? And where are we going? If we continue with where we're at right now, where is that taking us? And where do we want to go? What's the discrepancy? Right. And so that's the vision piece. That's that tool that is constantly used. And here's the thing, especially with parenting, and when they're cute and little and in the first part of their childhood, you give them every excuse. Oh, they're sassy because they're 4, they're doing this, or, they're just in elementary school, or they're just in, early middle school, or what have you. But it gets to a point that the excuses are starting to wane in their weight. And you're like, wait a second, we might actually have something we need to address here. And that's usually when I start seeing people. I would love to have every parent, that has a kindergartner on up, that would be great. But when they become more problem aware is when I typically start to see them. And so that's that vision piece. And then the next one is discipline. So vision and then discipline. You have to do what you say you're going to do. You need to be able to stand on this side of the bridge and see on the other side of the bridge is where you want to go, and develop the plan in order to walk over the bridge and get the thing done, right? You were talking about, you can't help a person that doesn't want to be helped, essentially. And, if someone is down in a pit and you are helping them and you lower a ladder down there and they're like, yeah, I don't know how to get out of the pit. And you're like, climb the ladder right here. Maybe you even get down and you show them rung by rung. This is how you do it. They're like, yeah, no. And it's like, well, you're not, willing to have the discipline to follow through and do the thing. And so discipline is a huge part of this process, the huge tool that you need to use. And vulnerability would be next. You have to be able to be vulnerable and open yourself up to change, to what is happening. When you are in a leadership role, which you are as a parent and in many other capacities, when you open yourself up to lead, you need to be able to be in touch with your vulnerable self, because if they're going through something, you need to be able to meet them where they are and then show them the way out so they can learn how to lead themselves, right? Love and lead them to a place they can love and lead themselves. That is what we want to do. And so vulnerability is essential. I really understand where you're coming from. That stinks. This is what was happening to me too, and I get it. Or having your vulnerability be used as a tool in order to show them that their ideas are of value, meaning, hey, I have this thing going on right now and I'm not really sure what to do. What are some of your thoughts? Oh my goodness, that opens up so much right there. Like they want to know what I think. I am, at this level that, my mom or my dad or my aunt, whatever, my leader wants to see my thoughts on this. That's awesome. Just this morning, I'm dealing with a scheduling something for next summer, and some plans fell through. And I went up to one of my 16-year-olds and I was like, I don't know, we're having this challenge. Do you have any, thoughts here on where we might be able to navigate this or whatever? And she was like, And you know what? She had some great ideas that I was able to bring back to the group and things like that. So using vulnerability. And the last one is resilience. So vision, discipline, vulnerability, resilience. And resilience is all about coping, moving through. It is not about sweeping things under the rug. It is not about burying things. It is about actually having the resilience to walk through the storm and get to the other side. So that is where I start with both adolescents and families combined, because I work with both. And we work on developing those tools first before we even.
It's amazing. I love all 4 of those. I'm a big vulnerability piece of it, absolutely, and discipline, and of course vision, and the last one, resilience. So one thing I was just thinking about, though, is several of the several of the friends of mine who are really struggling have multiple children, and they have one of the children that have unique health challenges, or unique, like extreme unique health challenges, such that it then leads to a lot of energy towards that one child, which is causing challenges with the dynamics with the rest of the children, right? What are some ways, and I think this is, often a common challenge when you do have this scenario and this dynamic in a family, what are some areas that you recommend to families when they're working through this type of dynamic?
So I think the biggest thing, honestly, is to work together as a team. And so, I know, unfortunately, a few families that are going through similar situations right now, and really instructing them to work as a team. So what I mean by that is, okay, so we are going through this right now. It's not your sister or your brother is going through this and we're going through it with them and you're on the side. We as a family are going through this, but I want, whatever say one of the siblings has, a gift of talk, of communication, of, touching someone through their words, letting them know, I could really use you in this situation in order to help, this over here. Can you talk with your aunt about the age appropriate, of course, right? But can you talk with your aunt about this? Or can you talk to your sibling right now about what is going on with them? Because they really need your perspective right now, right? And just working together as a team in order to go through this, but definitely making sure that have one-on-one time with each child every single week. That's a mandatory in our house. And that's a mandatory for sure in any family experiencing something like you're talking about, because then they know, okay, at least once a week, I get mom or dad all to myself. And we're just going to sit and we're going to talk about, something fun that's happening in my life, or something that is on my mind or my heart, or a challenge I'm facing. It's not going to be all about the situation that is at hand that takes up so much of our lives, right? So one-on-one time, for sure, show up to their things and make sure they're at least in one extracurricular that is outside of the situation at hand. Baseball, dance, theater, whatever it is. Make sure they have one thing that is outside. And if you need outside help to get them to that is absolutely fine. Many of these, not all, but many of these families, can try and get neighbors or friends or church members or whatever to help them. Make sure they have something outside, and make sure you show up to those things as much as you possibly can. And so then they are living their own life, but also being a part of the solution for whatever is happening within the home too, using their strengths to help the family as a team and letting them live an individual life as well. So
love that. I love those examples, because I love how you provided very useful ways, to immediately jump in and do that. That is amazing. What kind of maybe conversations would you advise maybe a parent to have with the child who is saying, everything's always about, this child who has cancer. Like, no one sees me because this child has cancer, or no one sees me because we can't go eat where I want to eat because this kid's food allergies and whatever, what are some ways to have some one-on-one conversations, or some ways for that child to be able to voice those inner fears that they have, to be able to speak their truths out loud and be able to walk through
Number one, don't deny it, right? Don't deny it at all. Let them have that stage, so to speak, to speak on. And if they're angry, let them be angry. Just make sure that you are not the brunt of, the one they're throwing stones at, so to speak. And, something that we say in our home a lot too is, it's okay to be angry. It's not okay to be disrespectful, right? You can be angry, absolutely, and you have reason to be angry, but it's not okay to be disrespectful. So if you need to say something right now, then I am right here and I want to listen to what you have to say. So number one, don't deny what they're going through and be like, no, we do your stuff. We do your stuff, right? Because that's going to be a natural response that you want to do. If you've been trying and these parents are so exhausted, they're trying so hard, and
Yes.
you're going to want to lash back and say, no, I've done it. But maybe not in their eyes, in their perspective, right? We all have very different perspectives. If you look at a perspective like, in a long, long telescope, it's all these lenses that are placed one in front of the other, in front of the other. And as we get older, there's more lenses. And, I just remember back in, AP physics in high school, right? If you put one lens in front of another, it changes everything, right? And so their perspective is going to be different than yours. So respecting that is key. Don't deny what they're going through, and just say, yeah, it's really hard right now. I completely agree. And I'm really sorry that it's hard right now. And so acknowledge, don't deny, acknowledge, and then ask, what can we do right now in order to help you within the next week, say? What is it that you're looking for? And sometimes it's going to be feasible. And frankly, sometimes it is not. And that is okay, but you need to ask them what they're looking for so there's clarity in there. And then at the end of this, you want to restate what you think that they are saying, right? And just to be clear, what I am hearing, stay calm. You have to stay calm. But just to be clear, what I am hearing is this. Is that what you are trying to say? Is that what the message is that you want to get to me right now? Right? And maybe after blurting everything out, they're going to be like, no, that's not necessarily the message. I'm just really upset about it right now. And they can hear it, said out loud in a different way from another perspective coming from you. And they're like, okay, this is what I really mean. And then you can get more clarity on that. Or they might say, yeah, that's how I'm feeling. And you can respond accordingly in kind and be like, yeah, I get it. Something else I would really recommend for families that are doing things like this are passing journals. And it is just between, the parent and the, each child, or the child that's struggling, not necessarily the sick child, although that could be useful in that scenario too, sick or hurt child. But having a passing journal, because when there's something that happens when you are writing something down, and it changes in, the brain dynamics, and you can be like, is that actually true? Right? After you see it on paper and it's looking back at you, and you're like, oh, that might not actually be true. And you reword it and you can clarify yourself. That's why journaling is so effective. And so you can pass that back and forth. And they're more apt to maybe say something that is hard to say out loud, but they can put it on paper. And you can pass that back and forth. Just, what's the highlight of your week? What's hard this week? And just be open to what they have to say. And it might be something completely selfish, and that's okay, because especially when our kids are going through their middle years, they're going through a very selfish time, brain chemistry wise. Understanding that, knowing that, and embracing that, but also guiding toward a more selfless direction is important. So
I love the idea of the passing journals. I think that was fabulous. And I love when Brene Brown really walks through this whole idea in conflict resolution, right? Like restating back. So let me say back to you what I think I heard to make sure I understand, because this is really important to me and I want to make sure I heard. And I love that in conversations, because then I've done that in heated conversations and then had the moment for the other person to say, no, that's not what I meant. And I say, okay, tell me again. And then you say, okay, let me try. And then the thing is that when you do it, it's disarming to the other person, because they're not expecting you to actually be listening to what they're saying. Because here's the deal. People do not listen anymore. They just listen to respond, right? They don't listen to actually understand. So one, they're really thrown off that you actually want to understand. Secondly, I have found that then when they take the opportunity to say it to you a second time, they're so much calmer. And they end up having this little twist of grace And they take away a little bit of their anger the second time they're saying it to you. And it's almost like there's this little spirit of kindness in the second time. And then when I restate it again, it is if each little iteration of it, so much of that anger and frustration is removed. I mean, it is amazing. It is like a magic cure. So I love that. And so one thing I was going to say is what would what kind of thoughts would you provide to the parent who now has a child in their 20s that they've now, they're probably like, I don't know, banging their phone or something. They're like, Anjanelli, this is really great that you are sharing this now. You suck. Cause I wish I would, you know what? My daughter is about to turn 22. I wish I had learned this when she was younger. I mean, I want to be very clear. God knew what he was doing when he gave me one child and one girl. I have a special needs daughter, and yeah, she's amazing. She is amazing. I did not know. I did comment earlier this week that I did not know I was going to be taking care of a special needs daughter for the rest of my life, and she's still a blessing. But God also knew what he was doing. He only gave me one. Okay, back to the fact of the question: what thoughts and advice would you give to that older parent, right, who has a daughter and really wants to connect with the daughter, and they're no longer in those forming of the prefrontal cortex, because now it's completely formed, and yet, we want to continue to grow as humans.
Well, first of all, there's a little bit of grace period in the 20s because prefrontal cortex doesn't fully complete formation until 25, 26. And so there is that piece. And what I call, so my 19-year-old, I say that she's in the bay right now. There's a whole story that I have in my work that I do of, there's the parents and the children that are building the boat together, or the parents are building the boat, and then they walk down to the shore together. They learn how to, in the storms, do all the things. 18 to 25, 26, they're in the bay. You can see them if you have binoculars, but they're out there, right? They are out there. And then after that, they really go off on their own voyages and journeys, etc. So my 19-year-old, she's in the bay. Your 21-year-old, 22-year-old, she's in the bay. And so, so there's a little bit of grace period there, but this is one of the areas that vulnerability, and I love that you brought up Brene. I'm a huge fan of Brene. I worked in her realm for about a year and a half too. And so vulnerability is absolutely key here. And you need to approach, because you need to lead, right? If they're having issues then of one way or another, then you need to lead, so they need to learn, or they can learn to lead themselves, right? They're having a problem, a challenge there. So you need to lead in vulnerability. Go sit down with them and have a conversation and let them know, you know what? I wish I would have been able to do this, and I wish I would have had the tools to do this back when you were home with me, but I just didn't. But listen, I want to walk through this with you because I want you to be set up to be the absolute best version of yourself that you can be. And I think you're on your way there. So I want to walk with you through this. And can we go through this together, right? Can we learn some of these things together and be vulnerable in that and open to that? And it can create this beautiful connection and communication and clarity between you that then you can launch together. And so that's what I would say to anyone that has, honestly, even you hear about those stories of these parents on their deathbed and their kids are in their 30s, 40s, 50s, 60s even. And it is that moment of clarity, that moment of, oh, wait, you know what? I wasn't the father, or I wasn't the mother that I really could have been, should have been, wanted to be for you. But I just want you to know that I absolutely love you and I'm proud of you. And I want, if they have the time, I want to learn and grow forward with you. And then it can be better after that. There's always a window. And as for if you are a 20-something, listening to this, or an adult listening to this, and you grew up with a parent that didn't do this, one of the biggest light bulb moments that can happen for adults is when we realize that our parents did the best. Some didn't, I will say, but most parents did the best they could with what they had, right? And if you look back on the history of parenting and what our parents were, given when they were children versus what they had available to give us versus what we had available to give our kids, you get into these generational patterns, if you will. And so when we can open our eyes to, what, I wonder how my mom or my dad grew up and why they didn't have this vulnerable piece or this kindness piece or this ability to say, I'm sorry. I was just, listening to one of my colleagues yesterday talk about how so many adults grew up without a parent that ever muttered the words, I'm sorry, for anything, right? And so what happened and what did they go through in order to make them who they were, right? And that can bring up some grace and love.
That is so powerful. That is so powerful. Okay, so a couple of things, the three things. One, I want you to tell all the listeners how they can find out more information about you. I will include all of your links in the show notes, but I do want you to talk about your program, how they can find more information. Two, I want to find out if there's anything that you really hoped we cover that we haven't covered. And then before you go, it is a requirement that you share your favorite motivational quote. So we will do that at the end. But why don't we start with how can they find you and find out more information about your program?
The world's complicated, so I like to keep it easy. Everything is on NellieHarden.com. So that's NellieHarden.com. And so you'll find all my social links. You'll find masterclasses and resources and all of my blog posts and everything are out there. And so you'll be able to get everything there. And be sure to subscribe. I have a new book that's going to be coming out in the next year. And so that's really exciting. And I'm getting everything, which will have all of what I talked about today in it. And you'll be able to see, oh, this is the format, the blueprint to put this all together. And like I said, it's for raising your daughters. It's also for women in general to be able to put this together. So all of that. And
the second question, is there anything you really hoped we would cover today that we haven't covered? Because, I love in Coffee and Conversation to meander all over the place. And sometimes I'm like, whoa, wait, we really want to make sure. And this is also an opportunity. If you have a message you really want, if the listeners remember nothing from our conversation today, what do you want to make sure they remember and they take home from this message?
Oh, goodness. I would say that in order to listen, not everyone is going to lead people in life, but you have to be able to lead yourself. And so that is why being a self-disciplined leader of your own life is imperative. You need to be able to lead yourself toward the successes, even if you don't ever lead anyone else. Leadership is given this idea of, oh, well, you got to, be the head of a company, the head of a charity, the head of something. And that's not necessarily true. You have to be able to lead yourself. So every human needs leadership, direction, and teaching in order to have successes in their life.
So true. Okay. Now your favorite motivational quote.
Is this by me?
It is either by you or by someone else. It doesn't matter. It is whatever your favorite motivational quote is. Go for it. And you don't have to have just one. Some people have slid in. Some people have slid in too. I don't charge you extra for a second one.
Well, something that we say around our house all the time is discipline yourself so others don't have to. I say that constantly. It applies to literally everything from put away the toaster, right? To actually do the thing that you said you were going to do, that you committed to doing, whatever that is. So yes, discipline yourself so others don't have to is a me saying that we say all the time. And then my go-to is, it's actually a verse from the Bible, and it is 2 Timothy 1:7. That is, we are not given a spirit of fear, but of power, love, and self-discipline. And so I always remember I do not have to live in fear, because I lived a great deal of my life in fear, which was the catalyst to shame and guilt and all the things. And no, I have a spirit of power, love, and self-discipline. And I really root myself into that in order to move forward and help.
That is absolutely beautiful. Well, Nellie, I am very grateful for your time today and your wisdom, and I cannot wait to share it with several of my friends who have been really struggling with this. This has been so valuable.
Thank you so much for having me.
Thank you for joining us today with your coffee and conversation. We hope you've been encouraged and learned something from today's story. To learn more about today's guest, please check out our show notes for more details. Now it's time to remember to like this episode, subscribe, and turn on your notifications to ensure you do not miss future episodes. Recovery Advocate Network envisions a world where individuals with mental health challenges receive comprehensive and effective treatment without the worry of financial burdens to themselves or their families, all without the stigmas often present in society. We are proud that every individual worked with RAN does so on a 100% volunteer basis. You can support the mission by making a financial donation via PayPal or Venmo, or email donate@recoveryadvocatenetwork.org if you would like to donate items for our next fundraising auction. Please visit our website at www.recoveryadvocatenetwork.org to learn more. Now, stay in the loop about upcoming events, future episodes, and more by following us on Facebook, Instagram, Twitter X, TikTok, LinkedIn, and all major podcast platforms. As a reminder, the experiences and advice expressed in this episode are the host and guest's own personal stories and do not represent the opinions of any organization mentioned. RAN is passionate about opening the doors for all voices and experiences, not just those expressed in any particular podcast. If you want to share your experiences or expertise, we encourage you to be a future guest by emailing us at podcast@recoveryadvocatenetwork.org or submit a blog by emailing blog@recoveryadvocatenetwork.org. We also encourage you to comment on the episode so that we can continue to provide content that is most beneficial to the community. How do you do that? Visit our website at www.recoveryadvocatenetwork.org, and in the top right corner, click that comment button and comment. So listeners, what do you need to do? Pause what you're doing, subscribe, follow us. Please give us a like and a 5-star rating, write some meaningful comments, and most importantly, share these episodes with your friends. You never know whose heart you will touch, so please be a part of a reason someone has new hope today. If this episode was triggering to you, we encourage you to contact your support system, therapist, national and community support groups, the Global Crisis Text Line by texting 741-741, and/or if in the U.S., dialing 988 to reach the Suicide and Crisis Lifeline. If you're in the U.S. and need additional resources such as shelter, support group resources, transportation, food, and/or a safe, confidential path out of physical or emotional domestic abuse, please call 211 or visit www.211info.org for assistance. Now, we know you are very busy, and we are grateful that you said yes to sharing time with us today. If you stuck to our 3 C's of engagement and listened to the full episode, then visit the podcast section of our website and leave the comment about the podcast, and you'll be entered to win an autographed copy of one of the books from one of our book club series, as well as a Coffee and Conversation coffee mug. So thanks again. Until next time, back to your coffee.